All right.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get to it now. This is the one. So moon landing. I'm going to start easy on you guys. Okay. So just there you see a picture of a reflection of the helmet. This was one of the photos that they put out there, and you can kind of see this little thing up here. And if you sort of see it in higher resolution, this is what it looks like, and it looks very much like a spotlight. So a lot of these moon landing photos were filmed in a studio. We'll get more. I'm just starting now. I know I'm not going to convince you in a few minutes that this whole thing was a hoax. I just want the question to enter your mind, could it be a hoax? And if I can get you there, if you're not there already, I'm happy. Just the possibility that it could happen. So I recommend 3 videos to start, and these are things you can kind of look in on your own time, but there's a video called "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon," 46 minutes, raw footage showing the hoax. So they show some of the raw footage behind the scenes of how they fake some of the stuff. There's a more recent video put out in 2018 saying NASA admits we never went to the moon. And they just show various clips of people from NASA admitting that we never even went yet. And then there's a long video called American Moon, 3 hours and 34 minutes. And it's basically a documentary why moon travel would be technically impossible in 1969. So at that time, just technically it could not be done. They basically had less, the technology of a calculator. If you look at what we have now with these supercomputers, quantum computers, all that sort of stuff, and to think that they did this on the first shot, when they tried to develop the first plane, the Wright brothers, I don't know how many times they failed before they got it right, but yet we're to believe these guys got it right on the first try. Little bit of a stretch there. So let's just read what the Bible says. Genesis 1. And God made 2 great lights. So I want to focus just specifically on the moon today, whether people could actually land on the moon, whether it was actually done, or whether it might have been just all staged. And God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So he proclaims here it's a light. The moon is a light. It's not terra firma. It's not firm ground for men to land on. It looks like a light. So astronomers for hundreds of years have recorded seeing stars and planets through the moon. It's transparent. Again, it's a light. You can see through it. There's actually many documented astronomers seeing stars moving behind the moon, like in the daylight or things like that. And you can see these things kind of moving behind. You need some high resolution to be able to see some of this, especially in daylight. But this guy is an amateur astronomer. The music's a little bit loud, but when you get to the part where he starts talking about seeing these things behind the moon, it should kind of make you wonder, is the moon really solid?
Hi, Blue Fox here. On September 27, 2015, I took pictures of the eclipse of the moon. I set up my 5-inch telescope using a 17mm eyepiece and took these snapshots. You will notice in the pictures, stars show through the dark portions of the moon. And as I go through them, I'll blow them up a little larger so you can see these stars. I'll point to one. There's a blue star here, a white star. There's another star right here that shows up quite good. And that's that picture. Move on to the next one. You can actually see the stars here. We'll zoom in and we'll see a red star with a white star right in here. And then there's 3 stars, a white star, a blue star, and another blue star.
So again, just kind of pointing out these things can be seen. I saw another video or two. I decided to include this one, but these stars are visible through the dark part of the moon, and it just kind of makes you question, okay, you know, I thought it's solid. You shouldn't be able to see behind it if it's a solid object. Oops. I want to talk to you about sunlight and moonlight. So you're often taught that, oh yeah, moonlight, that's just a reflection of sunlight. But that's not true. They're very different things. So sunlight is actually very golden, it's warm, and it's a much different light than the moonlight, which is more of a silvery light, and it's actually a cool light. Sun has a drying effect, whereas moon actually has a dampening effect. And so again, if it's a reflection, it should have the same qualities and same features. Sunshade actually cools. So we all know when you go into shade that you get cool. But a lot of people don't realize, and there's actually videos you can find of this, where when people go into the shade of the moon, it actually gets warmer. So the moon is having a cooling effect, and when you go into shade from the moon, it actually starts to heat up in that area. And I've seen places where they've shown a 2-degree difference when you step into the moon shade. Sunlight actually has a purifying and antiseptic effect on life, whereas the moon actually has a petrifying, decaying type effect. It makes things dirty or less clean. So again, just to kind of reiterate, the moon is not a reflection of the sun's light. That's something that, again, you're taught in the public education school, but that is not the truth. Again, it's scientism rather than science. So the moon is its own light. It is not a reflection of sunlight.
Wow.
Operation Paperclip. So right after World War II, the Americans, the Allies, I should say, they recruited a lot of the German scientists. They came out of the US, some under their own names, some under new names. But it was a top secret program where these scientists, these Nazi scientists, would actually be brought to America. Among the scientists was a gentleman named Wernher Von Braun, who would become the head of NASA's Rocketry program, with the stated goal of landing a man on the moon. So this is the deception. This is the mystery Babylon coming together and deceiving the world into believing things that are wrong and in error and against the Bible. Again, let God be true and every man a liar. So the moon landing, the word NASA in Hebrew actually means to deceive. So you can see here the Hebrew, NASA, and there it means to deceive. That's the definition. So, you know, among all the different possible acronyms they can use, why choose that one? Why choose NASA? Why not choose something else? One thing you got to understand, the way God works, there's something called lesser magic among Mystery Babylon. And what that means is they actually have to tell you the truth. They actually have to, they can't deceive you so far that you're, you know, you have no defense. They actually have to tell you what they're doing. And the rule is as long as they tell you what they're doing, they're not responsible. A lot of people might remember 9/11. There was a lot of warnings in Hollywood on movie, you know, saying that this was going to happen. A lot of things that people saw as signs that point towards it. And again, that's kind of these things. Even Hollywood movies, when you watch a lot of Hollywood movies, they tell you about the coming nanotechnology, about hybrids. If you just watch Netflix, you'll see a lot of this nonsense on there. But they're actually telling you what's coming. And it kind of absolves them of guilt in a sense. They're allowed to carry on as long as they're sort of telling you in advance. The biggest grossing movie, I think it's still the biggest grossing movie of all time, was a movie called The Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. And when you actually analyze the movie, what they're actually telling you is the movie from Satan's point of view. So the character there, Thanos, who is God, is representing God, but they present him in an evil way. But if you just watch the movie, really pay attention to some of the dialogue, they're actually telling you who Thanos represents. There's a line where one of his daughters says he never lies, right? There's a line there where he sacrifices one of his daughters in the movie, just like Christ was sacrificed. And when you start seeing these things, what they're presenting is the world from Satan's point of view. And what Satan is trying to do is he's trying to get the heroes of the world to rebel against this godlike character. And that's what the Avengers are all about. They're all these people that pick up these powers, whether through transhumanism, whether through witchcraft and sorcery, whether through genetic upgrades like Captain America. They're rebelling against this godlike character. And so they're telling you their plan ahead of time, but they're doing it in a way that people will just interpret as entertainment without seeing what the truth is behind it. So again, just getting back to this word NASA, they're telling you they're deceiving you. And I always get a kick out of these guys wearing the NASA t-shirts, and I just think to myself, okay, buddy, you want to admit you're deceived? You know, go ahead. But even the word NASA is the word that was used to describe what Satan did to Eve in the garden. So the Satan deceived her, and NASA is the word actually that's there. You'll see NASA's logo, okay? And a lot of people, there's this red thing here called a vector. And very interestingly, that vector should only just be shaped like a letter V, but the way they present it here, it's basically a forked tongue of a serpent. And again, this is them in plain sight telling you what they're doing, but putting it in a way where you're not going to suspect what they're actually doing. So again, why, of all the different ways, the different logos they can use, why a forked serpent tongue? This is Wernher Von Braun, and here he is. You know, what's he doing on the moon, right? There's the lander, there's the flag, there's one of the astronauts. This is a picture you don't see very often. There's scattered places where you can still try and find it, but it's basically Wernher Von Braun on the moon. Now, the interesting thing about Wernher Von Braun is on his tombstone, he actually puts the verse Psalms 19:1, which says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork." There's a lot of thought that Wernher Von Braun felt a lot of regret for what he did. He has an underling, Carol Rosen, who was, I think, someone who worked under him. And she actually mentioned what Wernher Von Braun was warning the world about. He was saying that this whole NASA thing, this whole rocketry program, all the money they pour into NASA, it takes it doesn't take much of that money to put into the space program. They kind of sell a lie of that. But the bulk of the money is going to space-based weapons, which we know exist today. We're talking about the GPS, the things that come in, what do they call it? The hand of God, these things that kind of come down and put a kinetic blast onto something and destroy it, just like the Georgia Guidestones. So these space weapons exist, these space technology exists, and that's where all the funding for NASA goes into. Very little of it has actually gone into space exploration. But anyways, Wernher Von Braun had this last message to humanity, Psalms 19:1, that he just said that the heavens declare the glory of God, the firmament showeth his handiwork. This whole nonsense of going to the stars is just all nonsense. And he knew it. He actually told his, you can look for the interview, Carol Rosen, and Wernher Von Braun says one of the last hoaxes, first he's going to say we got to watch out for the Russians, then we got to watch out for rogue states, then we got to watch for terrorists. And he said the last thing to watch out for mankind is aliens. So you can kind of see they're going there a little bit with these aliens and saying they're coming to the planet. They're going to attack and we got to defend ourselves. And it kind of brings up that whole Endgame, Infinity War, Avengers kind of thing again, where we're going to be under alien threat and have to activate. But it's just, again, that's what Wernher Von Braun told his secretary to tell people. Wernher Von Braun, I'm sure, was very knowledgeable of the plans that the Mystery Babylon had for people. There's no such thing as aliens. You know, they're basically just demons. Just one thing to remember. Moon landing. So there's a lot of photo evidence that, again, this thing was very much a hoax. The waving flag, you know, there's no wind on the moon, so how can you have a waving flag? You have this a lander. And normally, if you've ever seen these landers, the way they were operating was there was this huge blast. There's this huge blast that kind of comes from below it, and that's kind of how it's propelled. And you can see here, it's placed there. It wasn't landed there because there's no impact crater. There should be a blast area where that thing landed. It doesn't exist, right? And again, it's just saying that this photo was staged. Again, I showed the spotlight video. There's tons of these, but I'm just pointing out a few of the bigger ones. There's this footage from the moon, and you can see that what these arrows are all referring to is the different shadows, and they're all coming in different directions. And that again points to spotlights being up here. And these shadows, you know, they should all be in the same direction, but they're all pointing different directions based on the different spotlights that are up in the studio. This thing here is called the Sea Rock. And so this is a stage prop, but it was present in one of the photos or videos on the moon. And you can see very clearly there's that letter C there. Now, they've tried to explain this off as saying, oh, that's a natural occurrence, but it doesn't look very natural. It looks very imprinted. This is a photo that they said was from the moon. And just speaking of photos in general, you know, they talk about extreme temperature variances where, you know, it's hard to believe a camera would actually be able to operate properly on the moon and have film operate on the moon for 1969. But in this particular photo, you can see here the Earth, and there's no stars. Where are all the stars? You know, did they didn't see them, or did they? You can actually find that this photo that they actually sent as being from the moon, it actually is photoshopped. It was found to be later to be a doctored photo. One thing about stars, you'll see that the different various astronauts have different explanations for whether they've seen stars or not. So I'll just play this short clip of whether or not, you know, they did see stars or not. And it's just kind of interesting how all the different astronauts have very different views of whether they saw stars or not. So I'll just play this short clip here.
Course was black, but it had sort of a velvet sheen to it.
Yeah.
All
because
the
you can
time.
see, because you can see the stars.
Oh yeah,
You know, and pretty much all the time you can see the stars.
It's unfathomable blackness, like with a texture you feel like you could stick your hand into.
And when you look at the stars, and I see so many stars and planets.
It's the darkest black you can imagine.
See stars if we're on the dark side of Earth and planets?
The sky is deep black when viewed from the moon, as it is when viewed from cislunar space, the space between the Earth and the moon. The Earth is the only visible object other than the sun that can be seen.
Since the moon has no atmosphere, then a daytime picture, if you're there in the daytime of the moon, you see a full night sky of stars, even with the sun in the sky as well.
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon by eye without looking through the optics.
The thing about Carl Sagan, billions and billions of stars, there really are billions and billions of stars, and you can see it. In fact, they're so numerous, it's very difficult to pick out the constellations you and I see here on the ground.
It's not a
This is the
black
cool thing.
void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
There's all the stars there. The cool thing is about you can see it during the day.
Yeah, you can, and there's more than stars. You can see planets. You can
Right.
see moons.
You see the gas Magellan clouds of the
You
Milky Way
see the
galaxy.
Magellanic Cloud.
So again, you know, standard, you know, investigative procedure, if you have different witnesses seeing something, you put all the witnesses separately and see if they tell the same story. And these guys are all telling different stories. And so again, someone's lying, right? If not all of them. But the thing to remember is you know, their stories should be consistent if they all been to the same place and all doing the same thing. I can go into this a lot more in depth about the green screens and all that kind of stuff, but I'm just kind of wanting to have you guys question things. I'm not out to prove it to you. I'm just having you want you to question it, whether it's an actual thing or not. So just a few other moon landing questions. How did NASA conveniently lose all the raw tapes and telemetry data of the Apollo 11 mission? So if you ask them, they say it's all been lost. You can actually see some different footage of wires, slow motion, tracking shots on the moon. So some of the other Apollo footage, not the first mission, but some of the later missions. There's a strong belief that Stanley Kubrick was actually employed to make the moon landing videos. And one of the things, Stanley Kubrick actually had a lot of regret doing that. And when you watch his movie, The Shining, it was actually based off a Stephen King novel, but he went way off course. He didn't really represent the original book at all. And he actually buried a lot of revelation about the Apollo missions in there. You'll see some weird stuff when you look at that. If you just Google Stanley Kubrick, The Shining, Apollo moon missions, you'll see a lot of hidden things. That Stanley Kubrick was a very brilliant man. He was able to relay this. One of Stanley Kubrick's last movies was Eyes Wide Shut, where he reveals a lot of Mystery Babylon's doings. And the sad thing is that 4 days before that movie was released, Stanley Kubrick mysteriously had a heart attack. Pretty healthy, no problems, was otherwise well, and then just dies before that movie gets released. But it really does expose a lot of the workings of Mystery Babylon. One other thing about the moon landing is it's been nearly 50 years since the last moon landing. And why? You know, you'd think we'd be so advanced, we think we'd be shuttling stuff here and there, you know. At some point they had to find a way to stop putting money into that and stop having people believe that we can still keep doing it, because you know, you have to sort of end the hoax. You can kind of pull it off one time or a few times. 5 missions, I think, went up to the moon, but at some point they got to stop it because they just couldn't keep faking it anymore. And one of the ways they did that was through the Challenger disaster in 1986. Oops. Now, here's the interesting thing. So you probably all remember in 1986, these 7 astronauts going into a shuttle, and within a minute or two, the shuttle explodes in midair. And it's presumed that all 7 of these people died. Now, this is an older picture. This is probably from about 5 years ago. But all of these people in the Challenger, they're all very much alive today. A lot of them under the same name that they had before. So 6 of the 7 were still alive 30 years later. There's a lot of good videos. BitChute is always a good place, BITCHUTE, to find some of these videos. So YouTube, Google, they hide a lot of this. But you'll see these guys are all very much alive. And it's the old magician's trick. They get your eyes focusing on one thing. So they let you see the people going into the shuttle. And so in your mind, you believe they're in the shuttle. Now, they might go out some back door, someplace you don't see. They don't show that to the public. The shuttle goes up. The shuttle still explodes. In your mind, they're still in the shuttle. But in reality, they're back off in some back room somewhere. Maybe something that looks like a little pilot's kind of area there. So you can kind of get the picture that they're still in the ship. But it's just basic magician deception. I'm going to play this little clip. This is from one of the videos I mentioned about NASA admitting that we haven't been to the moon. This is a really good video, but try and find it. But here we go.
Here we have another astronaut that wasn't told about the moon landing 48 years ago.
The plan that NASA has is to build a rocket called SLS, which is a heavy lift rocket. It's something that is much bigger than what we have today. And it will be able to launch the Orion capsule with humans on board, as well as
oops. Oh, sorry.
landers or other components to destinations beyond Earth orbit. Right now, we only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. We only can fly in Earth orbit. That's the farthest that we can go. And this new system that we're building is going to allow us to go beyond and hopefully take humans into the solar system to explore. So the moon, Mars, asteroids, there's a lot of destinations that we could go to, and we're building these building block components in order to allow us to do that eventually.
Once we travel beyond low Earth orbit, the crew will be exposed to larger amounts of radiation. So we have to design both the crew protection systems and our electronic systems to withstand this radiation.
So that would mean that Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin were a tough bunch of SOBs able to withstand all that brutal radiation, considering these challenges are still yet to be solved. So how is it that we had the technology to achieve this amazing feat back in 1969, but we're still working on the technology in 2017, almost half a century later? Well, I managed to find a very clever and well-informed astronaut that will totally straighten things out for us and explain exactly why we're not able to return to the moon and break through those Van Allen radiation belts. Have a listen to this clever chat.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again.
This guy, oh boy. Here's a real-life example of what can happen to you when you're exposed to all of that outer space radiation. And if you're a child with aspirations of becoming an astronaut, being a very good liar might be a positive attribute to have on your resume. Here we have an...
So we started the talk with let God be true and every man a liar. And so I just want to end this whole talk session on this one clip here, because we're putting this to the test about letting God be true and every man a liar. This gentleman, Bart Sibrel, is about to ask Neil Armstrong to swear that he walked on the moon. So if he walked on the moon, it shouldn't be a problem. But let's see what Neil Armstrong says.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen, Mr. Sibrel.
Yes. If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put into the record in the argument
and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Several, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. I have the tape.
Sure, that'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to, why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Seibel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
Just a couple of links just to end the talk here, and then we'll do a little bit more Q&A. But so hopefully we're going to get either the video or the PowerPoint on godstruegems.ca. So feel free to visit that site later. There's a very good book about Mystery Babylon called Pawns in the Game. It's a book by a Canadian, actually, is a Canadian Admiral, William Guy Carr. And he just talks about this big international conspiracy. Again, just how you saw with COVID, where all the nations of the world were in lockstep, all the governments of the world were lockstep, all doing the same thing. There's a connection there. There's something that's connecting all of it, and it's Mystery Babylon. One really good video I appreciate, it's a really long video, it's about 5 hours, but it's well worth it. I'd tell you to watch it in chunks, but there's a gentleman named Altian Childs. He was a former winner of a TV show called The X Factor in Australia. He's a singer, but he actually talks about this world secret religion. They do everything in open. They lie in plain sight. They work in plain sight. They hide in plain sight. They have secret language where they communicate with each other out in the open. So if you look into that video, I highly recommend it. Again, you can find that easily on BitChute.